This is the small town of Richland, Oregon, located some 60 miles east of Baker City. A farming community, Richland sits near the massive Brownlee Reservoir, connected to the Snake River on the Oregon-Idaho border. Snow-capped mountains and wildflowers dot the landscape of this remote part of the Northwest. Visitors come here in large numbers, mainly because of the incredible fishing on the reservoir. This happens to be the favorite fishing hole for Northwest Outdoors fishing host Hobart Manns. Manns comes here a couple times a year because he believes this is some of the best warm water crappie fishing in the Pacific Northwest. White and black crappies are a species of panfish and are easy to catch. In the spring, they hover in shallow depths, allowing bank anglers a chance to hook up. Also known as calico bass, they are great tasting, and on Brownlee Reservoir, there is no catch limit. It is a cloudless and windy day at Brownlee, and in these conditions, there are a few different ways to work the shoreline. Hobart gives us some tips on catching crappie.
One tip I'd like to pass along to the viewers is that probably 3 out of 5 rods that are broken every time you get into a car door, car window, the trunk lid, someplace in a car probably breaks 3 out of 5 rods. These new racks that you see, these new car top carriers, you normally see them with skis or golfing equipment or something else, are wonderful for rods because you can put a full-length rod in the carrier. They don't get broken, they don't get confused. Nice, easy place to store and transport them without abuse. There's foam pads inside to take care of them. They close and lock. It's just a good thing to have if you've got several rods and you're going to take them fishing. You won't break them if you got them in a car top carrier. Now this reservoir is 52 miles long. It's one of a chain of 3 complexes on the Snake River. It separates Oregon and Idaho and stretches from the town of Huntington, Oregon, down to and past Richland to Brownlee Dam itself. It's about 52 miles long, and it's got about 35 miles of shore access, like we're fishing on here. This public property. It's interspaced with some private, but there's just an awful lot of public bank that you can access and fish Brownlee Reservoir from. So the fact that we're not fishing from a boat today doesn't mean that boat fishing isn't good, but we wanted to show the public that you can drive over here, you can fish from the bank, and you can catch fish. Not only the crappie that you see us working for here, but you'll also find good numbers of channel catfish and good numbers of yellow perch. So there's other fisheries available that you can access without a boat in this reservoir. On windy days, or any day for that matter, you'll see the tip of a sensitive rod like this will tell you what's going on sometimes long before the fish will. You'll see the fish that maybe stop. Sometimes that rod tip will go back to a straight line. If fish took the pressure off the lure on the retrieve, that tells you that you've got a strike out there. If the rod tip were to go back straight in line rather than dragging the lure itself, that would be a fish, like right there. And we now have a fish on, and we're going to see where it goes with this rod tip. Fish told us he was there, and oh, it's a big black. Patience on that, because that fish was in close when he took it. Maybe we're on to something. If you once don't succeed, you keep changing colors till you get the right one, because colors do make a difference. Put on this little green shad body with the red head. These fish have a paper mouth, a thin membrane in the side of their face, and if you hook them in that side of the face, it'll tear a big hole. If you take the pressure off, the hook will flop out. If the hook is positioned so that you get them in the top of the lip or the bottom of the jaw, you'll land them every time with no problems. But those hooked in the side of the face, you may lose probably 30–40% of the fish. If you take the pressure off, that hook's going to flop out of that little hole that you just created when you hooked the fish. Laid a nice cast out, low to the water. Now we're going to count down. We're going to do about a 10 count. I've talked about 3. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That should put us down about 15 to 20 feet, and that's where the fish are on cue. Oh, and you count down the 10 that we counted. We set the hook. We've got a crappie. We're going to bring it in here. Nice, beautiful fish, good color. This is what we're looking for. Ones that look just like this. But that's a nice hand-sized crappie. Those are great eating, and that's what Brownlee's famous for. I'm going to put on a different lure here, and in my tackle box here, as you can see, I've got a complete collection of twister tails, minnows, regular skirted grubs, and I've got a grub or a nail grub. And the neat part about it is that tail never stands still. It's moving the whole time. It quivers much like a real minnow would quiver in the water. So we're going to give a lure that's got a lot of action. You don't have to move it fast to make it work. That's a decent fish there, and heavy too. Swing him up.
There are a few more tips for catching crappie on Brownlee Reservoir coming up.
Lifting him out of the water was quite easy, and again, this is a beautiful, probably 9.5, 10-inch Brownlee crappie. Now we're going to
Filleting crappie can be tricky. Hobart shows us the best way to fillet out your catch.
To the belly meat. Now we can lift that fillet right off the skin.
But first, here's a special camp recipe: fried game bird breasts.
We're here at an operating elk camp deep in the heart of the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. They've loaned it to us to show you what life in a real camp cookout situation would be like. This morning we're going to cook for you a game bird recipe. Now we're using chicken breast this morning, but if you were lucky enough to have captured a grouse, and grouse are in season, then that would have been the game of the day. We're going to start off by preparing the batter and let the breast meat seep in the batter for about 15 minutes. Then we'll transfer it to the flour and fry it in a camp skillet. So the first thing we're going to do is make the liquid batter. We're going to take 4 eggs, crack them. I'm going to put them in this pan here. See if I can get them in there without, I'm going to crack 4 eggs in here. Get those down very nicely. To the eggs, we're going to add about an equal amount by volume of beer. We're going to add an equal amount by volume of buttermilk. What we have would be about 1 cup of eggs, 1 cup of beer, 1 cup of buttermilk, and along with that, just for extra flavor, we're going to add some salad mustard to it, about a tablespoon like that. We're going to get a whisk and beat that up, bring those all together. I know it looks kind of messy, but we're in camp, and some things are not as easy to do as others. Makes a nice batter or liquid. Now we're going to go over to our chicken or game bird breast, and we're going to cut it into relatively small strips. And the reason for cutting it into small strips is twofold. It's going to fry easier, and I can inspect each of those strips as we go along and make sure that there's no pellets or buckshot if it was a wild bird. And if it's chicken, which this is, then it will also fry at a quicker and more uniform flavor. Now this can be used as a main dish, or it can be used as finger food, hors d'oeuvres in the afternoon, whatever you might want to call it. Chicken strips, but that's what we're going to have here. Get these all whacked off, and I'm going to put them in that batter and leave it set in the batter for about 15 minutes. And we'll take it out of the batter and put it into a skillet containing peanut oil that's been brought up to about 325. One more piece here to cut. Again, if you were in the field and it were a wild game bird, you would be able to check each piece and make sure that there were no pellets or bloodshot meat. So we're going to lay these strips in the batter. We're going to lay these strips in that batter, make sure that they're coated, and it gives them a chance to pick up the flavor of the buttermilk and the other ingredients in there, the egg, the beer, buttermilk, and the mustard. And I use this same recipe a lot for fish. It does a very nice job. We're going to stir that around a little bit, make sure it's all covered. We'll wait about 15 minutes, then we're going to coat it and put it in a skillet, and we'll fry it. They've sat in the liquid now for about 15 minutes. We're going to take them out and dredge them in some flour, and the flour that we're using is Crustace Fry Mix, which is something pretty standard, easy to get. We're just going to lay them in that, get them in here, and we'll coat them all, and we'll put them in the skillet. Now I'm going to save about half of them. We have some folks here in camp who would like it with a hotter flavor, and to the balance of the liquid, for those of you who like things a little spicier, we'll add some hot sauce, and we've got some Baja jalapeno hot sauce there, and we'll put a little of that in, and that'll give that a hotter flavor for those. So we are going to get two different flavors out of the same batch of liquid simply by taking those who want mild the first time, and we're going to heat it up and make the second batch a little hotter. And now we're going to move from here over to the stove. We've got this nice camp stove set up over here in an elk camp. We're going to drop these right into the skillet. It's got about 1/4 inch of peanut oil. We're going to drop these in this hot oil, this peanut oil. It's about 350, 325. They won't be in there but just a little bit. They'll turn nice golden brown. I'm going to get the other spatula here to turn them with. Let them simmer there for a second. They've been in there now, about 3 minutes to a side. We're going to take and turn this. Starting to show a nice golden brown on the offside. Turn those chicken strips that we've got, wild game bird breast if you would, depending on how good a hunter you are. We'll let them fry till both sides have that nice golden brown effect. For those of you who would like it with a little more zip, we've added some jalapeno sauce to the batter. We're going to stir that in here and make sure that all of the chicken strips get a little bit more of that heat. We'll take those and roll it in the flour. Just move them from here into here. It doesn't take long, about 1.5 minutes per side with nice thin pieces like that, cooked very readily in that hot oil. Here's one we're going to turn. You can still see it's got a little uncooked flour on the top side, and on the other side it's already a golden brown. So we'll just lay it back in there. There's the finished product. Camp chicken strips or game bird breast. We have hot jalapeno on one side, we have plain on the other. We'll add a little salt and pepper to these, and we'll have hands from camp reaching for them from all directions.
Back at Brownlee Reservoir in eastern Oregon, the wind is picking up, making fishing more of a challenge. Hobart's fishing partner, Peter Comerfield, isn't having any problems though with the weather. Hobart has some tips for fishing in the wind.
On a windy day like today, where the wind is going to throw your cast off, it helps to do a couple of things. Number one, keep your rod tip and make your cast as low to the water as possible, and cast into the wind so that it lays a loop on the water. You can pick that slack up and it'll drift the bait into the strike zone that you want it to be. If you cast straight out from you, the wind will pick your lure up in the cast and move it further downstream or downwind, and not bringing you back through the strike zone you want to be in. So that we're on a fairly steep rock face here, and we want it to drop down. There was a strike, so that we can bring our gear up through it. And we've also used a slightly heavier lure. Normally we'd be fishing 16th ounce, but these are 8th ounce heads. They sink a little quicker, but they'll lay into the wind on the cast, and they'll get down into the strike zone so that you can keep a tighter line. If you have a light lure and the wind, trying to keep your line taut so that you can tell when the fish are hitting, a little difficult. So tip of the day is keep your rod tip low, cast into the wind, let it drift down to the strike zone area that you think the fish ought to be, and use a slightly heavier lure. It lets you keep contact with what's going on a little better.
Beautiful fish. Look at that.
It's a good fish. We had a good fortune to hook this one just a little further out in a little deeper water. This is the way it's supposed to be. Rock. I don't know if this will work, Rick, but we'll try it. I just snagged myself on a rock, and quite often if you've done that, if you can do a bow and arrow, if you can create a backlash or a back cast in your line, I'm snagged on a rock face, and I hope it isn't in there deep, but if I take and make my line taut, and I've got some slack line in my hand, and when I get a good pressure on it, if I release the slack line, it'll throw a pressure back, sometimes flipping the lure off the rocks backwards. Not always, but sometimes. Let's see if it works. It's free. It does work. So if you'll give it a chance to snap backwards or flip over backwards with a little pressure rather than a steady hard pull, you'll get everything back. We either got lucky or we did the right thing. We're going to show you a quick, easy way to fillet crappie without a lot of mess, without a lot of hassle. We've set up an impromptu little cleaning station here where we were fishing today, and I've got my portable table and stool. I've taken some newspaper that we brought along, and I've torn the sheets in half, and I've put the halves between a board here on the table. This board allows my hand to rise high enough to make the second or backside cuts. We're going to fillet the fish without opening the body cavity. We're going to take the fillets, put them in a plastic bag so we can clean them a little later by rinsing them. We're going to place the carcasses in another plastic bag and take those to a disposal site. But we want to show you that filleting crappie should not be a problem. You're not going to need an electric knife, and you may have seen this a couple of years ago, but let's show you again. We're going to lay the knife on an angle so we can come in behind the scales. If we lay it on top of it and it's straight cut, the knife will get dull very quickly. So we're going to lay it on an angle, come in behind the scales to the backbone, and we're going to take the point of the knife and work our way along the backbone till we're about across from the vent. Now you're going to see the point of the knife emerge, and we're going to slide it along the backbone to the tail, but we're not going to cut it off. Now I'm going to reverse the knife direction and bring it up to the bones. I can feel the bones in there. I'm just going to put my fingers on the top. I'm going to lift the knife and come over the rib cage. I'm going to slab that off, and there we have a crappie fillet on one side. It's all open. We haven't lost any meat. We'll take the skin off by laying the knife down. We're going to work the knife along that skin, pick up the fillet. We'll put it in our plastic storage bag here. The rocks are to keep the wind from blowing everything away right at the moment. Going to turn the fish over and basically repeat the process on the other side. We're going to lay the knife at an angle, cut in behind the head here, put the point of the knife against the backbone, work our way down until we think we're across from the vent, bring the knife across. You can see it emerge on the other side again, slide it down the back. Now we're going to fleece the second side off of that rib cage because you can't work the direction that we're working with it. So we're going to make a couple of fleecing cuts, long slicing cuts. There's the second side fillet off. I'm going to put the point of the knife under it. I'm going to pick the meat off of that, put it in the plastic bag, and you finish that fillet. There was no problem. We can see through it. We wasted no fish. We can put that over in the pile for disposal. We can take the two fillets that we're going to eat, put them in the bag. We can continue the process by folding the paper over it. We now have a clean work surface for the next couple of fish, and they'll stick to the paper. That's how simple cleaning crappie can be without using an electric knife. Learn to do it with a real knife. It's real easy, and the fish will always taste better.
This show ends with a Northwest Outdoors artist profile on master woodcarver Doug Harrison. In wildlife art, the work is in the detail. For woodcarver Doug Harrison, detail is his passion. Harrison lives in Yakima, Washington, and spends his time making realistic sculptures out of pieces of wood.
People always have the misconception or the thought that, well, woodcarvers are sitting with their feet kicked up and just whittling, making chips out of wood. Well, whittling is no longer such a bad thing because it has really gotten so that the work is precision, detailed, and you have wildlife that looks realistic, birds that look like real birds ready to fly off the table, fish that look like they're going to swim off the table, and animals look like they're going to walk off the table. And these heightened forms of realism just amaze people when they come to a wood carving show because of the old thought that it's just somebody sitting and whittling on a piece of wood. The state of the art has just come a long ways.
Harrison is a master carver and has created many award-winning pieces. He is also a member of the Yakima Regional Woodcarvers Association, whose members gather on a regular basis to trade ideas and share techniques.
Throughout the Northwest, there are organizations that have been established for a number of years, and there's new groups of carvers that are getting together constantly. In Yakima, we started in 1983, and we have a group of almost 40 carvers that get together once a month and share technique, share ideas, socialize. We put together an annual show, as do a lot of the clubs around the Northwest. These clubs and organizations that have put these shows together are always welcoming new members and people interested in learning carving or coming in and even if they're an established carver, to come in and be a part of the organizations. To get started in wood carving, I would recommend that a person start with a clear piece of wood and a knife. That's a good place to start. It's economical. It's a great place to see if you're going to enjoy creating a piece out of wood and learn about what the grain of the wood does.
Learning how to manipulate wood is something Harrison learned when he was very young.
Grandpa used to whittle chains out of wood, and he'd do farm animals and caricatures and little folk art type figures. And it fascinated me, the things that he was creating out of wood. And being a patient man, he started me out with a pocket knife, taught me how to sharpen this pocket knife and create things, basic things, out of wood. So I've always given my grandfather the credit for giving me the start with creating special things out of wood. Today, what I've done over the years is just keep trying to hone my skills and techniques to get a finer and finer quality of realism, because that's what I enjoy to create out of wood, is fish, birds, and animals that look like fish, birds, and animals. From a basic cutout of a piece of wood, you would start making a rough out, and this is an example of just roughing in some of the features and highlights of a project. And moving along there, you just keep taking it down into more and more finer details, addressing musculature, fur lines, ears, eyes, nose, claws, and then it's coming back and starting to put fur on it if it's a bobcat like we're working on here. It's the time it takes to put on the fur texturing. And if it was a bird, it would be time putting feathering detail on. And this piece is actually at the painting stage, and I've been currently putting spots on it. And the spots will just keep adding more and more of the realistic features and effects that I want on this bobcat. And you can see here the little holes for where his claws go. And I'll take a bamboo shish kebab stick and actually carve the claws out of bamboo and insert the little claws in there. and carve them out of wood.
Learn more about this show, number 1602, by going online with northwestoutdoors.org. On the next Northwest Outdoors, head to North Central Washington for the Ride to Rendezvous. Spend the night with the folks from the Washington Outfitters Association on their annual fundraiser.
I'm a lover of the other side of the hill.
Also, get a great recipe for Dutch oven chicken. Plus, learn how to build a snow cave in Central Oregon. That's on the next Northwest Outdoors.
Funding for Northwest Outdoors is made possible in part by Kershaw Knives of Portland, Oregon, makers of precision tools and cutlery. Kershaw Knives strongly supports outdoor programming as well as responsible outdoor activities throughout the Pacific Northwest. And by Subaru, engineered and designed for all types of activities in the great outdoors. The craftsmen and women that repair and supply parts for Subaru West believe that enjoyment of the Pacific Northwest should be available to everyone. And by alltrek.com. Alltrek provides high-performance clothing and gear for every outdoor experience, including paddling, camping, hiking, climbing, and more. Information can be found online at alltrek.com.